stuff, but remember your phones and all the family that wants to call you and your alarms and all. Let's silence them. Good idea, Lisa. Good idea. So I think we had you over the summer one time.
Yeah,
and then
was
we had
here.
you at Christmas.
Christmas, I
You
don't
didn't get to
think.
come this past Christmas because family got sick or something.
Yeah.
But y'all will probably remember after he starts playing. You'll remember having him. But we're glad to have him, and I'm
That's
sorry
good.
I'm not staying.
Oh, no worries. It's Friday.
Y'all make him feel welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for being here. Good evening.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm going to say too, that's.
He's from Memphis.
Do you want a mic stand or you just want to
Oh,
take
I'm
it off?
fine.
Okay.
I can turn it off, right?
Yep, that's
Okay.
that little knob there, and then at the end, just give it tone.
All right, perfect. Well, we've got a fire going, even though it's 78 degrees outside. But that's okay. Good evening. It's great to be back. Thank you. I always love to come here. I'm Robert Buxton, and yes, I play classical piano, but I also play a few other things.
Yeah.
So I try to make something, for everyone.
That's right.
But no fear with the classical music, because I will talk about it. Sometimes I talk too much, but one thing that classical folks stopped doing, sometime about 100 years ago, maybe less, we stopped improvising, and we stopped, being spontaneous. And I'm guilty of this myself. I'm saying we classical people. And I think we ought to bring it back. So I've been trying lately to do more of that. So if you can help me, could you give me some random notes, please? Just give me one note.
A.
Okay, I heard an A and a B flat. Okay, I need a couple more.
A.
Middle C and A. How about that? That's a little idea. Give me one more then. Just C sharp. Okay, that's a little odd, and I like it. It's quirky. Okay, so let's see what happens with it.
Again, that's what it is.
Always try to create something out of, I don't want to say nothing because I wasn't nothing, but you gave me random notes. And so you did the job. I just plugged in the numbers. Okay, I'm going to play now to start with a very sad piece. Life, there's sad and happy in any life. And this is a piece by Gluck, a composer from the 18th century in Vienna. This is from an opera called Orpheum. And it's an excerpt, it's called Melody from the opera. And the story of the opera, well, let me talk about the composer first, I'm getting ahead of myself. Gluck lived in the mid-18th century. So he was a little bit earlier than Mozart in Vienna. And Mozart was very influenced by him, especially with his opera writing, because that's what Gluck mainly composes, opera. So the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, it's an ancient Greek myth. You might be familiar with the story, that Bird seems to be. That what happens in the story is that Eurydice dies, she goes to the underworld, and Orpheus can't accept this, so he goes with his harp, his lyre, L-Y-R-E, I'd point that's not L-I-A-R, that's a different meaning of liar. He goes to the underworld and charms the gods there to allow, his wife to come back. And Hades says, you can take her with you to earth again, just do not look back. You may have heard that phrase before in the Bible, don't look back. Sadly, at the last moment, Orpheus turns back and loses Eurydice forever. So it's a very tragic story, but in the opera, I saw the opera at the Met, and I knew the story of Orpheus, but I didn't know what was going to happen with the opera. All this sad stuff happens, and then at the very end, Eurydice reappears, and they had this big party, and everyone lives happily ever after. It's kind of nice. So this piece is an instrumental from the opera. The original is played on flute and strings. This is a piano arrangement by 19th century Italian composer Scambati, which is a beautiful musical name. I love that name, Scambati. It sounds delicious. It sounds like a dish. I'm gonna have the ravioli alla Scambati, please, But, so this is Gluck Scambati, melody from Orpheus. It's a lament. It's Orpheus lamenting his wife who's gone. So. So even if classical music is not the thing that you gravitate towards, here's an analogy. People, ask me this. They'll say, well, how do I feel like I don't understand it or something. I said, look, I don't understand cooking. I can't cook, but I'm very passionate about eating. So it's the same thing with music. You just let it, And what I think about that piece, okay, it's based on an ancient Greek myth. It's from an opera in the 1760s. It might seem also long ago and far away. That's a good jazz tune, by the way. And it is, but people haven't changed all that much in that time. If you've ever lost a loved one, well, you get that piece. It's that simple. Theory and music history, all that is just extra, I believe. It's important, but it's secondary. The main thing is you experience loss, you get that music. And the next piece is something very familiar, and it's also, it's familiar sounding, but it's not familiar to my fingers yet. So I hope you'll have a little forgiveness, but I wanted to just play it for you anyway. It's a very new piece for me. This is Schubert's Ave Maria, famous, but it's arranged by Liszt. I can't sing, I can't, even if I could, you wouldn't want to hear it. So this is Liszt's solo piano arrangement. Liszt adds some frills and some virtuosic things to it. He makes it his own in this arrangement, this transcription. But I was reading about Ave Maria, and I learned a lot about that piece I didn't know. I simply assumed, because I heard it sung, I assumed it was the Hail Mary prayer sung in Latin. That's how most people sing it. Well, the original is not. The original is based on an excerpt of a poem by Sir Walter Scott, The Lady of the Lake. And it's in German translation. The original text of Schubert's song is German. And it's related, it's sort of a prayer to Mary, but it's not the Hail Mary prayer. And what's happened is it's become custom. People sing it in Latin to the Hail Mary prayer. I just thought that was interesting. I didn't even know that. And now I know. So that's a little tidbit there. Schubert, he was born in 1797, died in 1828. That's not a long life. He died at 31. And he was very ill for much of his life. And he knew his time was limited, and so he composed even at a feverish pace because he knew that he didn't have time. So this is from 1825, only a few years before he died. And I don't know, that there's something about maybe that he knew that his time was so limited that gives Schubert's music this feeling of, I don't even know what the words are. There's a painfulness, maybe, something like that. So anyway, here's Ave Maria. I'll do my best. It's brand new for me, so it's like the second time I've played it in public now, third. So, because Liszt also, it's Liszt, he adds some stuff, not like that, but he adds extra notes there, and it's hard. Thank you, I appreciate it. It's a little new. This is a couple parts in the middle is still medium rare, but I'll get there. Now I'm going to play some of the music of Paganini, arranged by Robert Schumann. I think the last time we met, I played you some other pieces from this set, but not these. These are more recent for me to have learned. Paganini was like a rock star of the early 1800s. I mean, he really was like Jimi Hendrix or somebody at that time. I'm not exaggerating. He was Wine, Women, and Song, then that's an understatement. There were people who thought he was possessed. That's how controversial he was. And then there were, of course, those who loved him. They loved his maverick style. He was just this wild man, this improviser. The Romantics loved him. Liszt and Schumann and so many others. And they were a bit younger than him. You know, they were a generation later. So it's interesting because in a lot of the popular music of the 60s was not by people from the baby boomer generation. I was like, Bob Dylan was born a bit before. So were the Beatles, they were born in the early 40s. And, but they became, you know, the heroes of the baby boomers. So I'm thinking it's similar with Paganini, who was born in the late 1700s, whereas Schumann was born in 1810, but that became, you know, Paganini became their guy. So I mentioned that about Paganini, but what happened with Schumann is he heard Paganini in the 1830s, he did these arrangements, and he did 12 of them. He actually, incidentally, Schumann arranged half of the 24 caprices. I don't know why he did just half. Well, I'm glad he did half, but he didn't do all the caprices by Paganini. But what happens is there's a progression, and the ones I played for you over the summer are from the earlier set, the earlier ones in the set. And in those, Schumann is a little bit more just trying to sort of copy Paganini and maybe add some accompaniment. But as he goes on with this project, you hear more Schumann and less Paganini. It's like if you were reading a book in translation, and there's two ways to translate. One is the translator can be like Google Translate and do word for word almost. And that's what Schumann did in the beginning of these. But in the later ones, it's like a translator taking liberties with the original text, making it their own. That's what you're going to hear tonight. And Robert Schumann was the opposite of a child prodigy. He wanted to be a novelist. That didn't quite work out. He wanted to be a pianist, virtuoso pianist. He damaged his hands. He actually used a device meant to strengthen the pinky finger or something. And then he finally turned to composition relatively late in his mid-20s or something. And he had bipolar disorder, which they didn't quite get the way we do now. I don't know if we get it now, but we have treatments for it. We have more of an understanding of it than they did in the 1800s. And Schumann suffered tremendously with it. And I think you hear it in his music to some degree. The rapid changes of mood. This one I'm going to play now, it sounds like it's over about 5 times, but it's not. It's just changing character. I've heard criticism of this. Someone said Schumann's music, it's like shish kebab. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. There's no unity. Here's my question. What the heck is wrong with shish kebab? I don't understand. It's not even... But that was meant to be a negative. But that's just what to expect. Schumann's music consists of fragments of things. It's not one big idea. It's a lot of fragmentary things. And in that sense, there's a quirkiness to it and an oddness to it, but that's what makes him special and unique and who's, personal. So, in this piece, you're going to hear, I would call them mood swings. Schumann created 2 characters to represent the 2 sides of himself. Florestan was his manic side. He called it Florestan. He called his depressive side Eusebius. You'll hear both, and you'll know which is which, the depressive or the manic. Finally, I want to say it's not only his condition, but it's also the literature he liked influenced his music. So E.T.A. Hoffmann was one of his favorite writers. Wrote the Nutcracker, by the way. E.T.A. Hoffmann's writing is just like this. Multiple plots going on at once. He makes the movies like this. I call it like the splice technique. You have one plot, splice, another plot. And it's not just one narrative, it's like multiple narratives. That's what Schumann, I think, that's what he was taking from when he wrote his music. I want to point out, there are people who say, well, Schumann was crazy and his music is crazy. And I don't really see it that way. He had a condition. Wagner was crazy. Stockhausen, the 20th century composer, he was crazy. Schumann was not crazy, he had a condition. He was a wonderful husband and a wonderful father, and I don't think you could say that about a lot of the classical composers, really, but you could about Schumann, and the parakeet agrees. So, here's the first of the couple I'm going to play tonight. This is Robert Schumann's adaptation of Paganini, the C minor Caprice. Thanks. I told you it would sound like it would be over a few times, and that's part of the music. So, oh yes.
How long did it take him to propose him since he was manic depressive? The changes do not come as rapidly
Right.
as they appeared on that song.
No, they
How
don't.
long did it take?
But he would have the memory of it, I think. And here's what it is with Schumann. The question was, how long did it take him to write things? And that's a really good question, because what Schumann would do, you could pinpoint when he had manic phases, and that's when he actually wrote most of his music, in a white heat. That's actually his words, a white heat. And then when he was in the depressive stage, he would write very little. So these pieces he wrote, these arrangements, they're arrangements, but there's a lot of him there. These were like the springboard for many of his major solo piano compositions that came after, the famous Carnival, some of the piano sonatas. That all came like right at this time, 1830s. And that was a major manic phase that he had. And yes, you're right, like he wouldn't, the phases are not, it's not like manic, depressive every few minutes. It's more of a prolonged period. But I'm just thinking he must have had the memory of that. Furthermore, I think that the rapid changes of character, I think a lot of that is the literature he's imitating. So, in other words, it may not necessarily be exactly a reflection of his condition. But for whatever the case may be, the way his music comes across is very different from anyone. It's very unique, and it's a little bit quirky, and it's got these features to it. So yeah, that's what I would say. You know, the next one, I'm going to do another Paganini study arranged by Schumann. This one, the way Paganini writes it, it's almost like an exercise for the violin. It's very reminiscent of the Campanella, another Paganini piece. And this is a technique that the violinists would use with the bow and different strings, like this. Da, 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 da. Now, what Schumann does is he turns it into his own thing. And when I play it, it sounds to me like somebody talking incessantly. There's almost no breath, maybe one or two commas, periods, punctuation, but it's mostly just like a motor going. And my great-grandmother had bipolar. I didn't know her. My father was close to her. And he told me that, yeah, sometimes when she was manic, she would talk incessantly and just almost without breathing, just like, and that's what I think this piece is. That's what it reminds me of. So here it is, another Schumann Paganini. And this one does not do what the last one did. It's just straightforward magic. It's not both, you know, so. I'll tell you a quick story about Schumann, about his music, and then I'm going to play you some Brahms, which is even more, you know, I don't know if it's more crazy, okay? But the story is about a French-born German pianist named Walter Gieseking. Walter Gieseking, he was a great pianist, and as I understand, not such a great person. Gieseking wrote a book, and pretty much what he says there is that a pianist should not practice with a piano. You should take the sheet music, sit at a desk, study it, and just memorize it directly to your brain, and then only when it's completely there, play. I tried this one summer and I had a massive headache the whole summer. But it's good in small doses. But Gieseking, furthermore, he was kind of, I think he was a member of the Nazi party too, so he was just not a good person. And here's a story about him, and you'll see why he's not a good person, but there's a grain of truth, I think, about Schumann here. In the 1950s, Walter Gieseking was giving a public lesson, and there was a young boy playing Schumann. And Gieseking stopped him, and he said, okay, I want you to start again. Play through the whole piece. Don't stop. Whatever I do or say, don't stop, okay? And so while the boy played, Gieseking screamed at him insults. And the boy just kept playing, and as he's playing, this poor kid starts crying, and he's just, Gieseking just like tore him down. And the kid finished. Walter Gieseking sees that he's sobbing and he's a mess, and he sits down and he says, okay, now you're in the right state of mind to understand and to play Robert Schumann's music. He could have gotten the point across in a better way, but I think there's that grain of truth about Schumann that, you can't just be, I think as my teacher said, I was playing Schumann for him once, and he said, you're playing it like, it sounds like you just had a nice breakfast with some coffee and some sausage, and you're reading the paper, and you just play. He said, you can't play Schumann like that. He was too intense, so that's the point, I think. My teacher was a little nicer, but, so, anyway, now I'm gonna play Brahms, Paganini Variations, Book 2. I may have done Book 1 for you in the summer, maybe not. I don't remember, but I'm doing Book 2 tonight. There's 2 whole books of these. This will be kind of the main course tonight. The roast beef and potatoes. The young Brahms showed up to the Schumann's home in Dusseldorf in the 1850s. And Brahms was very young, but he'd already written 3 piano sonatas. He knocked on the door. Clara Schumann opened the door. Clara was Robert's wife, and she was a great musician herself. He came in, he played some of his music. He said, I'm looking for some advice from the great Schumanns. And Robert came home and listened, and he said, you're a genius. Why don't you just live with us? We'll adopt you. It's basically what happened. Things were different. They didn't do background checks back then, I guess. So young Brahms lived with the Schumanns for a long time. While this was going on, Robert Schumann's mental health really deteriorated, and he tried to jump into the Rhine River in the middle of winter. Some fishermen rescued him. He was institutionalized. No visitors allowed in those days. It was almost like a prison. Clara snuck in towards the end and got to spend some time with him. He was nonverbal by that point. And then Robert Schumann died before turning 50. It's horrible. And Clara was pregnant with their 7th child at this time. So it's just unthinkable. Now what happened shortly after Robert Schumann died, the young Brahms, Clara, who was like 15 years older, and the Schumann children went on an extended trip to Switzerland. Of course, to get away from, to process the grief. But some of the neighbors thought this was odd, and they thought, what is this young guy doing with this widow, Clara Schumann? There's something going on there. They're dating, aren't they? And that's when this really myth came up, that there was a romantic relationship between Brahms and Clara Schumann. There's even a movie in the 1940s about this. Katharine Hepburn played the role of Clara Schumann. As great as an actress as she was, and as a compelling Hollywood movie, it's just not good history. You've seen Amadeus before, right? Great movie. Complete nonsense, historically. It's a great story, but it's just not true. I was listening to Salieri in the car a few months ago. Great composer. He didn't kill Mozart. They respected each other, Kind of feel bad for the guy that he got. But anyway, that's a different story, but it's similar. There's this myth of the romance between Clara and Brahms. Look, I don't know, I wasn't living at that time, maybe they were. But what definitely was there was some unrequited feelings between them. Definitely. You read their letters, they wrote letters for the rest of their lives. And you could sense that there's some feelings there that are kept under wraps. And I think that's what Brahms' music is like, too. He's very formal on the outside, but there's a volcano feeling underneath. And that's what's hard about it. You know, he was from Hamburg, it's in the north of Germany. I know some people from Hamburg, and to say they don't wear their hearts on their sleeves, that's an understatement. But it doesn't mean they don't have feelings. It's just they're not showing it all to you. And Brahms apparently was like this. So, actually, speaking of Clara, he would ask her advice on everything he wrote. And you know what she said about this piece? She called them wretched witches' variations. She didn't like them. Well, I guess he didn't listen to her, so he wrote it anyway. But the story of the Paganini variations, Brahms takes the famous 24th Caprice by Paganini. That's just famous music. And he does these variations. He originally was just writing finger exercises. I call them finger torture. One of them sent me to the orthopedist over the summer when I was learning book 1. And the doctor said, "What's causing you pain?" I said, "What's causing you pain?" "Brahms is causing me the pain." So, but then what happened is he realized that they were more interesting than just exercises, that they had musical value, they had soul, they had depth. So he changed them to this piece. So this is kind of a dual function. They're exercises, but they're also music. So it makes it even crazier to play. And you're going to hear each variation is like a snapshot, and the mood changes a lot. But it's not in a Schumann way. He did not have bipolar, is what I'm saying. But in the quieter ones, that's where I feel the unrequited, the feelings towards Clara, maybe. I mean, he was 29 when he wrote this, and what 29-year-old writes this? It's got too much nostalgia and regret to be, I mean, I don't know, another one. I feel unrequited feelings there, maybe. But again, I don't know for sure, because I didn't know these people personally. Here's Brahms' Paganini Variations, Book 2. Thank you. And I admit that the German Romantics, Schumann and Brahms, heavy, heavy stuff. So I'm going to play some different music. I'm going to play a couple more classical and then maybe some gospel. So I like to do. So let me play this Rachmaninoff piece. Rachmaninoff wrote a set of Paganini variations for piano plus orchestra. I don't have an orchestra, so I did my own arrangement of this. I'm going to play just the 18th variation of the Paganini Rhapsody. And it's based on that same. But in this particular variation, Rachmaninoff flips the melody upside down. If you take the sheet music and you turn it upside down, you get this.
Oh, gosh.
That's where that comes from. And you've probably heard that before. A lot of movies use that theme. The famous, have you seen the movie with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour? What's that called again? Somewhere in Time. It uses that melody. And it's appropriate because Rachmaninoff was plagued with homesickness. He left Russia in 1917. He never went back. And while he loved America, he had this aching longing for his country. So it reminds me a bit of my mom. My mom's from Russia. She left in the 80s though, so it was a little different. But still, she doesn't want to go back, especially now, but she feels this homesickness. And I was thinking about it, how do we, if you're not born in Russia, like I wasn't, I don't know if was anyone born in Russia here? But even if not, you'll get this piece, because look, you can't go home again. There's that novel called that. Even if you were born a block away from here and grew up a block away from here, you can't go back because home is a time, not a place. So that's what this music is about, I think. Again, I didn't know Rachmaninoff personally either. But this is, we're back up to the 1930s now, and this is the 18th variation of his Paganini Rhapsody. So, and it's a very different take than the Brahms, you know. I want to play a couple. These are really short, and then we'll do the gospel. If you need to leave, it's okay. I just gonna go over a little bit. So, does the name Daniel Aricourt ring a bell for anybody here? So Daniel Aricourt was a French composer and pianist. He was born in 1903. He knew Debussy very well, Ravel. And you know where he lived most of his life? Not Paris, Greensboro, North Carolina. He came here, he taught at UNCG for many years. And I've gotten to know his widow, Jane, his wife. She's a great pianist herself. And we've been talking, I've been learning a lot from her, and she's given me stacks of her late husband's sheet music. I'm going to play a couple things of his. First, an arrangement of his, and then an original piece by him. So the arrangement is of Claude Debussy's song, Beau Soir, Beautiful Evening. It really is actually out there, except for the traffic. Again, I don't sing in French or in any language, so this is a solo piano adaptation by Daniel Aricourt. Daniel Aricourt, Jane was telling me, his wife, that Daniel would go to Debussy's home, and I think he was trying to flirt with Debussy's daughter or something. I mean, it was like, hearing these stories is incredible, because we tend to think of these composers as like these statues who lived long ago. Well, not really. They were people. They were real people. So, and there were links to that past. If you talk to people who knew someone, or like Jane, her husband knew Debussy and Ravel. So anyway, this is the Debussy. It's going to be very different from everything I've played. It's very French. It's like French Impressionism. The French language is a lot different from German. Brahms, I would take one phrase, I'm hungry. In German, it's very, very articulated sounding. Ich habe Hunger, Brahms' music sounds like that. Well, in French, it's j'ai faim. It's like you have a baguette in your mouth, and the French, and the music is like that too. It's just very different. It's very subtle. It's very sophisticated. And then there's also in French cooking, it's all about sauce, right? They like their sauce with many sticks of butter. And French music has, I call this musical sauce. Listen to this. Those effects, it's just really French. And it's really nice. So here's Claude Debussy, arranged by Daniel Aricourt. I really like French music because it's just different. I love the other stuff, but the German music is like a heavy pot roast, but then the French stuff, it's like a souffle or something. I don't know. I'm generalizing. Yeah.
Take two.
a 1-minute piece by Daniel Ericourt himself from Greensboro. This is his pièce en forme de rag, piece in the style of a ragtime. And this is from the 1920s, after the First World War. French music changed after the First World War because that war was so traumatic for the country, I mean for the whole Europe. France lost 1/3 of its male population in World War I. And Jane told me that Daniel was actually in the French army, but he was very young and he played the piano. What do you do with a pianist in a marching band? Have you seen that Woody Allen movie, Take the Money and Run? He plays the cello in a marching band. So he played xylophone in the marching band. But World War I must have had an effect on him. And even Debussy himself, who died in 1918, that was the year the war ended, Debussy's music changed. It became a little drier, a little bit more terse. There's a piece he wrote, a late piece that Debussy wrote called En Blanc et Noir, in black and white, or white and black. So that, it's like Hemingway's writing is like this change. Hemingway likes to write with short sentences, like a typewriter almost, because that First World War changed things. And that's this piece. This piece is a little more crisp and dry, and it's got a great sense of humor. By the way, humor, I think, could be a coping mechanism from trauma, but that's a different story. So this is in the style of a ragtime, but it's got some weird chords, some little, not a whole lot of that, but just some spiky dissonance. When I play it, it reminds me of a Cubist Charlie Chaplin. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but that's what this piece is to me. It's just a Cubist Charlie Chaplin. Here it is. Daniel Ericourt. To close, I'm going to play some non-classical stuff. So my mother grew up in the Soviet Union. There was an illegal radio station that they would catch sometimes called The Voice of America. And you know what the theme song was to it? It was this. Duke Ellington. And yeah, Take the A Train. And I'm not going to play that, I'm going to play something else from that genre. So, but my mother and my uncle, who's no longer with us, that's their music. And for them, that music, jazz music, was America. And when they came here in the 1980s, they thought everyone listened to that, and that was the pop music of America. Boy, were they surprised. But I'm going to play something you don't hear so much now, Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade. I made my own arrangement for solo piano. So, because there's no piano version of it, so I had to make my own. I grew up on this stuff. I was born in the wrong year, sometimes I think. So, here it is, Glenn Miller. Thank you very much. I'm going to play a little gospel. I told you, my mother's from Russia. My dad is also an immigrant. He immigrated from Southern Virginia. And I grew up on gospel through him. So I'm going to do my own version of Blessed Assurance. This is,
Oh, dear.
I'm going to change it a little bit from the way you might sing it. Some churches might do it this way, but it's a different way. So here it is.
I don't know if we can stand.
Put a little of that Southern gospel flavor. So, yeah. One more real quick. This is another gospel, just another talk, just a little, I always say, I don't know why, just a little talk with Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Close with that. This will be the end. Thank you for coming. Sometimes when I get going, I can't stop. I'm sorry.
I won't be.
Thank I'd love to come back soon. If you'd like to tell
Oh,
Gino,
please,
I'll bribe you to say
please,
nice things.
please.
Thank you for having me, and have a great evening and weekend.
Wow, I've been there.
Yeah. Right, that's not.
I need that in one day.